Hello everyone, Catweazle here. Welcome to the channel and welcome back to Catweazle Daubs. Yes, our paint through of Conan. And this week it is Shevatas, and there he is, finished. How did I get there? Well, first of all we did our preparation step and then we primed our mini. Gone through all that, it's very boring. We'll get into base coating, that's the fun part. So let's get into it, and here we go. So we're using oak brown, and we're also going to be using a deep blue, and the reason for that is it will give the darker skin tone that we're using for Shevatas. The blue seems to help. It gives it a more natural look. So there's the deep blue there, and we're just going to add it. Now I'm doing a sort of voiceover here. It's a lot easier. I found that I actually painted quicker when I wasn't actually speaking while I was painting. You'll see it's been speeded up a couple of times, but generally it's less speeded up than it was last time. I've recorded about 2 hours of footage, and we've got it down to about an hour. A lot of it is at double speed. Previously, with the Conan episode I did last time, that was about 4 hours worth, so it's significantly speeded up. And as you can see, because it's only at double speed, it isn't as frenetic as the last one was. One thing I will probably do for the next episode of this is I will put the camera angle a little higher. I've swapped to the left hand side, which posed its own problems. I found out why I put it on the right hand side. I put it on the right hand side originally because then I could see the actual view screen for my video recorder. But when I put it on the other side, of course, the view screen was on the other side of the camera. So in order to be able to make sure that I had the mini in shot, I actually had to shoot this upside down, with the camera upside down. Fortunately, my video editing software allowed me to flip it 180 degrees, so you're actually seeing it the right way up, but the actual video camera at this point is upside down. And what we're doing here is, obviously, we're painting the skin tones for Shevatas. We've mixed a fair amount of that deep blue colour into the oak brown, and we've got quite a bit of water in there as well. We want a thin coat, especially because the primer on this particular model was the gesso, which goes on slightly thicker than if you spray prime. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't losing any details, so I have watered down the mixture that we've made. But as you can see, it does give a very nice skin tone adding the blue. I don't know why it does. It was a tip that I got from somewhere. I think I've probably seen it on YouTube or somewhere. But for darker skin tones, they do recommend mixing a bit of blue in, and it works a treat. It looks really good. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing all of his skin, obviously, and Shevatas is he's an excellent miniature. He's got loads of detail and lots of bling. He is the Hyborian equivalent of Mr. T. He's got jewellery everywhere, and all gold, and whereas Conan's a bit of a scruff bag, Shevatas is, he's a bit of a dude, to be honest. So he dresses in scarlet and gold, and only the best for Shevatas. He shows Conan up a bit, to be honest. But I did enjoy painting him. And as you can see, I'm cracking on here, putting the skin tone on. One thing I was able to do is, because I was doing it this way, I was also able to listen to an audiobook while I was doing it, which I recommended last time, and it really does help. It's a really nice way to spend a couple of hours. I was listening to The Devil in Iron, which is a Conan short story by Robert E. Howard. I suppose I should have listened to the story that actually has Shevatas in it. That story is called Black Colossus. Now, I don't think Shevatas actually ever meets Conan, to be truthful. Spoiler alert, but in Black Colossus, Shevatas gets killed early on. He's a master Zamorian thief, and he's raided this tomb. And he's in there, and he's avoiding all the traps and what have you that are in the tomb. But he doesn't manage to avoid them all, and he ends up getting killed pretty early on in the actual book, if I recall correctly. And then later on, obviously, Conan finds his way into the tomb. But he's the sort of Shevatas is a sort of vignette at the beginning of the tale who bites one. For the benefit of the reader, just to show how dangerous this tomb is. But that's not to say he didn't meet Conan. You know, okay, Robert E. Howard didn't write about it, but he may have met him. I mean, Conan got around. He definitely went to Zamora, so he could have bumped into our friend Shevatas at any time, I suppose. So when we're playing the actual board game, it's just prior to him, Shevatas, getting killed in this particular tomb that he gets killed in Black Colossus. So, as regards the mini itself and what we're going to do, once we've finished the base coat for the skin tone here, I'm going to do his wrap. His wrap is bright scarlet. He's all bright scarlet and gold, as you will see. I've just you notice there was a bit of what's it called when you move from a jump cut? That's it. You notice there was a little jump cut there. I was just letting the first coat actually dry, and as you can see, the second coat's going on a treat now. It's looking really good, and it's a really good shade I've got here. I was very pleased with it. It's a bit darker than on the actual artwork for the game, but I think it looks better darker. Darker the better with scarlet and gold. It really sets it off really well. And yes, I really enjoyed painting Shevatas. It was cool. So what else to chat about here? I'm using my size 1 brush. Don't have to be too careful. The vast majority of the skin here is, you know, there's loads of it. It doesn't matter if I go onto the wrap at all, or any of his bling. We'll be painting over that later. So it's just a question of getting a nice even coat, and this second coat does the business, and I don't have to put a third coat on, which is good. The more coats you put on, you know, the more the chance you've got of losing some of the detail. But I was able to do it in a couple of coats. I think if I do raise the angle of the camera, you should be able to see a bit better. It'll be as far away as it is now, but it'll be more top down, and I think that'll be a little bit better. Just a little too low here, but saying that, we're getting some of the best footage since the actual beginning of the video, so I must be getting used to it by now. It really does help putting your miniature on something like a piece of cork, like I've done. It allows you to manipulate the miniature pretty well, he says, as he takes it completely out of shot. But I think generally I did a better job this time, keeping the actual mini in shot, and you're not seeing my right hand in the way all the time. It's a little tricky around the hands here, but as I say, you don't really have to bother that much. You can cover over as we add in the other colours that we're using on the other areas of the mini. Just giving his chrome dome bit of extra there, bit of extra attention. Yeah, just checking to see if there's any little bits that I've missed. Which is probably why I took it out of shot there. I'm getting it right up to my eyeballs while I look for any bits I've missed. So apologies for that. You're just getting a nice picture of his legs and the cork that are used. In fact, it's so out of shot, it's focused on the paint pots I've got. So I've finished the skin tone there. I've now got some red, pure red from Army Painter, and this is a really nice scarlet colour. You'll see as it goes on. Again, using my #1 brush here, there's quite a lot of the wrap that we've got to do. I'm just doing underneath. Trying to be a little bit more careful here. The more careful you are, the less corrections you've got to make later on. You're always going to make corrections, but the more careful that you are, the further that you go on, the less corrections you'll have to do. In fact, I paint over a bit of his leg at the top here. I'll have to correct that later. Which I do, thankfully. I'm careful here to avoid, there are a lot of the like gold coins that are hanging down from his belt. So although I go over a few of them, I do avoid most of them. And here's the scabbard for the long knife that he's currently got drawn. So I'm painting around that. I'm gonna paint that a light brown, and there's some. It's like a tracery on it that I'm going to highlight in gold, but you'll see that later on. This is a really nice red colour. It covers really nicely. And it suits Shevatas. As I say, he's a bit of a dude. And he's like, as well as being like Mr. T, he's sort of like Huggy Bear as well. I'm sure he swans around the bars in Zamora with all his gold and his scarlet wrap, chatting up all the ladies. What we find at the top here, he's got rather a thick belt, but at the top, it's actually the wrap coming over the top of the belt at the top. So what you'll see me do is you'll see me actually painting that in. I don't do a particularly good job of it, but that's one of the major areas you have to correct later, because I make a bit of a balls of it. But it is quite a tricky thin little line of fabric that we're painting red. As you see, that the reds come up really, really well. And a benefit here of painting over a white primer, it really brightens up the red. You can just see there are some of the coins that have actually gone over, but as we'll be painting those gold, they come up really well anyway. Just painting around the scabbard here. At the back, he's got a sort of dagger there at the back. I've painted around the scabbard of that as well. On the handle, I actually left. You'll see it. You'll see that I actually leave the handle. Oh, I'm using number 3 brush here. Try and get some details in. Even though I use a number 3 brush, there's far too much paint on it, and I just splurge all over the belt, which I have to correct. But yes, that dagger around the back that's actually sheathed. I actually leave the handle of that white. I was thinking about like colouring it, and then I just thought, you know, Shevatas really is, you know, he's a man about town, bit of a ladies' man. I actually left it white. I thought he's the sort of guy who would have ivory handles for his weapons. So I just left it white, and I was very pleased with the result in the end. It looks really good, the white and the gold. So there's it. You can just see the handle there. Look at the handshake there. That's getting old, that, folks. Don't want you to think I've got the DTs or anything. That's just age. And I've got my specs on here, and I've also got, it's like a jeweller's loop, you know, one of those things that jewellers wear. And yeah, I look like some sort of like mad professor with it on, but really would struggle to see without it. But if any of you out there, you know, struggling with your eyesight, I do recommend them. I do recommend them. It's really helped me, especially on Shevatas here, and you'll see later on, because of the amount of bling that he's got on the necklace and the armbands, and he's got some filigree work going on both of his scabbards and on those arm wraps. Well, the sort of arm guards, really. And it really helped having the jeweller's loop to be able to zoom in on what I was actually trying to paint. Here I'm just putting a second coat over the wrap. As I say, I'm doing this at 2 times speed, so it had dried by the time I'd just done that tricky bit just above the belt, between the belt and his stomach. So it dried off, so I'd just quickly go in and put a second coat, make it nice and even. But it's coming up a treat. One thing I meant to mention during my Conan video, and didn't, was eyes. Now, you can paint eyes onto miniatures. I don't, and the reason I've just been reminded is I was talking about, you know, being able to see. Eyes are really tricky, and they are beyond me. Putting the whites into the eyes, and then you can sort of go around it with the skin tone to shape the eyes, and then put a pupil in there. It's best if you do eyes and you do that, when you're doing the pupil, don't put a dot. Try and put like a slash, you know, like a cat's eye. It works much better. I don't do it because it's just a horrendous faff. Eyes are just, oh god, no thank you. So I didn't do it for Conan. I haven't done it for Shevatas. I won't do it for anything else either, unless it's some horrible big bug-eyed monster that's a doddle. But generally with eyes, because of the eyebrows and the way faces are set up, they're in shadow anyway. So if you don't want to do eyes, don't do them. They are tricky. They are tricky, and they're very tricky to get right. You know, the really good painters, you know, they just nail it. But no, I decided long ago to give up on painting eyes. And as long as you shade your models correctly, you know, it just looks like shadow under there. So and you can always say they're in the middle of a blink. Oh, I've moved on to the fur brown here. I'm just using this for the sheaths, for both of the knives and for his belt. And also I use it on the arm guards. I've got sort of leather strapping on the inside of his forearms. I use the brown on that as well. You can use different browns if you want, but with this particular miniature, and I often do, but on this particular miniature, with his dark skin tone and the fact it's all red and gold, that tends to draw the eye a lot more than the brown of his belt and scabbard. So I just thought I'll be able to get away with one colour of brown here. Whereas with Conan, because he was so drab, because he's such a scruff bag, I had to have, in order, you know, to make his mini look a little bit more interesting, because he is so drab in Conan. But but he's a barbarian, you know, he's not particularly bothered what he looks like. But by having different coloured browns, it makes his mini a bit more interesting, and you can see a lot more of it brings out a lot more of the details. Shevatas doesn't have that problem because he's red and gold everywhere, and you know, you just look at him, you go, blimey, you know, Hyborian rock star that he is. So there's always plenty to look at with Shevatas. Let me know if you like this new way of doing it. I've got to admit, I'm finding it a lot easier to do it this way, to just chat, edit the footage, and then just add a track over it. As I say, it does mean I can paint faster. I'm not concentrating on talking as well as painting, and I'm able to crack on a lot quicker. Plus, you know, I can, when I come to this part of it, when I'm doing the actual talking, I've had a chance to, you know, reflect on the actual painting process for the particular miniature. So I find I've got a bit more to say. I mean, I haven't really shut up, have I, since this started? Whereas in the last episode with Conan, I was quiet for long periods of time because I was suddenly concentrating on what I was doing. Here we're doing the straps that hold the arm guards in place. Look at that brushwork. Oh, you can't because I've got the mini in the way. So, yes. Apologies for that. And now I've got it too close and he's blurred. But, yeah. I think that's another learn here, is not to have those paints in the background. I think the video camera is trying to focus on them. So if I take away the paints in the background, and perhaps I might try and put some screen in the background, like a dark screen. The reason is that will force the camera to actually focus on the mini instead of trying to focus on the bottles in the background. So that's another learn for me. Another jump cut there. We're going on to the ash grey here. Going to use that on the blade for his long knife there, and also on the arm guards. I didn't use a metallic. Well, I do use a metallic. I do use a metallic to actually dry brush over the blade and over the arm guards. But the reason why I'm going with the grey here, I wanted a very light coloured steel. And I find that if you go straight to metallic and, you know, paint it on, it can be fairly dark. And if you use something like shining silver, then it's just ridiculously bright. So I was trying something different here. I thought I'll use a light grey, and then I'll just do a very quick dry brush. And it came out pretty well. What I wanted was a very light coloured steel, but I didn't want it to look like, you know, too silver. And I think it worked very well. So I could use the ash grey, the light grey, and a dark metallic. I'm trying to think of the name of the metallic. I think it's gunmetal, that's it. Yeah, gunmetal rather than shining silver. And it got the look that I was looking for. So you'll see that in a bit. I move on to the metallics just after the light grey here. So here I am doing the arm guards. Again, I wanted those to be more of a light steel colour. But again, they do have filigree on them, golden filigree. So you'll see me putting that on later. Now I could have done these metallic. I could have done them silver. But he's got quite a bit of bling anyway, and he was getting a bit overkill, you know, silver and gold. And I've got to admit, he'd probably love it, Shevatas, but I was just thinking, no, it's too much, mate. It's too much. So if he was here painting his own miniature, he'd have probably gone for full shining silver and gold. But yes, I calmed him down a bit. Don't know what I'm up to here. I was probably having a brew. Put him down for a minute to have a slurp of tea. Ah, yes, I've decided what I'm doing here is places where I've made the balls up. So I'm just doing some corrections. Get all the corrections done before we move on to shading or anything like that. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I'm doing all my corrections. Then we're going to move on. I think I'll start shading very shortly. The actual metallics I put on as during the highlight step. Now, normally what I'd do is I'd put the metallics on and then I'd shade. But I think the reason that I didn't is because Shevatas struck me because he's a bit of a show-off. He would keep his, you know, his swords and especially his necklaces and bling. Yes, we're going into shading now. Yes, he would keep them very bright, was my thinking. So he polished them up. Another miniature, I would have probably put the metallics on and then shaded them and then given them a slight highlight. But I really had I was just really thinking that, you know, would Shevatas have, you know, tarnished metal on him? And I don't think he would. I think every night before he goes to bed, he gives everything a good old polish. Oh, the shade I'm using here. Very interesting. Remember how I put the deep blue in with the oak brown? Instead of using strong tone or deep tone, I'm actually using a blue ink here. And it's very dark. And because we put a bit of blue in with the oak brown, it works very well. So it goes on. I mean, it looks ridiculously shiny here at this point. The bits you can see, you will be able to see in a minute when I hold it up correctly. But yeah, it looks horrendously shiny there. But once it dries, it does an excellent job of... it dulls the skin a little bit, but we're going to bring that back up. But it's because it's dark, it's a dark blue ink. It does an excellent job on the dark skin tone, and it helps bring out the tint of blue that we actually put into it, and it gives it a more natural dark skin tone. So as I say, I forget where I got this tip from. Probably off another miniature painter from ages back, but I remember thinking it was a really good idea. So some people use red in the browns for skin tone, but I don't think it looks bright. I much prefer using the blue, and you'll see when I hold it up in a proper fashion, you'll see it better. But it's just nature of putting the actual ink on. It's easier to put it on if the miniature is sort of in a horizontal position. But obviously I wasn't thinking of the viewers at this point. I was just thinking of trying to get it on. So I do apologise for that. But it is easier to put the to put a shade on, or a very watery wash, you know, horizontally like this. Otherwise it just drips down the miniature. You can see it a little bit better now. As you can see, it's beginning to dry on the legs now, so it looks a lot more natural than it did. There's still a bit of glisten going on, but they are, as you can see, even from this far away, and with it still glistening a bit. Now we're going to use the red tone, and we're going to use that on the scarlet wrap he has. So if you have coloured shades, it's great to use, especially on the brighter colours, because this is a really bright red, and it just doesn't dull it too much. The reason you put a bright colour on there was for it to be bright. So when you actually do use a shade, it's going to dull it down slightly. But if you use an actual coloured shade that matches the bright colour that you've painted, then it does a much better job. And it's a lot easier to bring it up when you do the highlighting. And now I'm just doing the bit just above the belt, that tricky bit above the belt. So I've used coloured inks for the skin tone. I'm using the coloured ink for the scarlet wrap here. For the rest, I just use a strong tone. So for the grey on the metal and the leather for the belt and the scabbards, I just use strong tone. This will be it. I'll show you now. There you go. And that's one of the tones that we use with drab old Conan. The reason I'm using it on the weapons here and on the leather is I do want to drab those down a little bit, because the thing that you're looking at with Shevatas is obviously his magnificent skin tone and his bling. So you really want to bring that out. You're not interested in what bloody leather belt he's wearing. Just doing the wraps behind the arm guards there. Brings out the detail in those brilliantly in the straps. And you can see it there. Really gets into, really defines the straps. And if you take your time, you can really get it to pool around the belt. Highlighting. So I've let him dry here, and here are the two metallics we're going to use. Oh no, I did use shining silver. I thought I'd use gunmetal. Oh yes, using I think it's a 3 brush, this. I've got a bit of kitchen towel there for when I do the dry brushing in a bit. But here we go with the greedy gold. Now there is a bright gold, but I went greedy gold, which is not quite as bright, which is probably why it's not called bright gold. But because I'm not shading it back, I thought this was sufficient, and as you can see, it's bright enough. It'd have been, if I'd gone on bright gold and not shaded it back, it'd been much too bright. I'm just doing the top of the scabbard there. So around the top of the scabbard, there are a lot of, well, you can see them there. They're like medals or coins that he's got dangling from his belt. There's the actual buckle itself. Now on the artwork, the buckle has some green gems in it, but I didn't have a sufficiently bright green, and I just thought it looked, if I put it on, I just had a feeling it'd look crap. So I just kept it with the gold. If you see some of the miniatures online, you look at some pictures of Shevatas online and miniatures that people have done, they really go to town on this bit. The belt buckle and things like that. But as we said at the beginning of this whole Catweazle Daubs Conan, we just want it good enough from 2 or 3 feet away on the tabletop. We're not looking to win any prizes, and I think this does the job. Now I'm doing the haft of the knife here. You can see where I use the strong tone on the long knife, and I made sure that it pooled at where the blade goes into the haft, and that makes it a lot easier for painting the gold on the hilt, because you don't have to get right next to the blade. And this is when I decided I'm just doing the scabbard here for the smaller knife at the back, and this is where I decided, I thought, you know what, I'm going to leave that handle white and make it look ivory. The pommel, I'm going to do a bit of gold, and you're getting quite a good look here. But I think it's really effective. It just looks like an ivory handled knife, so I was quite pleased with that. Quite pleased with that. I didn't even paint the handle white again. I just left it the primer. Oh, and there's a little bracket there that's holding that scabbard on, so I've just painted that gold as well. And now I'm starting on his necklace. Again, some of the ones that you see online that have been painted online, they actually paint individual jewels into this. I've just made it, you know, a big blingy gold necklace like Mr. T. But some people have actually put individual like gemstones in there, which is, you know, amazing stuff. And if you've got the time and the eyesight, go for it. But me, I was just happy I was able to see where the actual necklace was. I put a massive, you see that then? It's a massive blob went on. But yeah, it's okay. Even though we've done the shading on the skin, I was able to. We've still got to do the skin highlighting. That's why I'm doing this now before I highlight the skin. Because once I'm highlighting the skin, any big blobs or mistakes I make, I can actually go over with the skin colour. So that's why I'm doing all the bangles and the necklaces and whatnot now. Once all those have been painted in, again, with the the belt bling as well. I could always go over that with the scarlet, because I'm going to highlight the wrap as well. So anyway, I make a mistake here. As part of the highlighting, I can actually go over it. As you can see with Shevatas as a mini, this is what really sets it off. As soon as you put his bling on, you know, he really comes to life. If you want to, I mean, because there is quite a lot of gold here. If you want to, you can do different shades of gold. And or perhaps, you know, you can do a single shade of gold and then just shade some, just to have a bit of difference. But I just had the idea that, you know, he spends all night, you know, making sure all his gold bling is all nice and shiny. He doesn't mess around. I'm just doing the filigree here on the arm guards. And you can see I'm using I'm not using the tip of the brush, I'm using the edge of the brush, and I'm dragging it across the arm guard, and it's catching on the raised edges of the filigree that's in there. So that's an excellent way to do it. That's a good tip. Instead of you having to sort of paint it individually with the tip, just dragging across the side of the brush, and it'll catch on the raised areas. And I'm doing exactly the same here with the scabbard. So it's almost like a dry brush, except you're not going as mad, and it's a lot more controlled. There we are, doing exactly the same there, just using the side of the brush, dragging it across the surface. Again, put a big blob on there that I have to sort out later. But it's just dragging it across the surface so it'll catch those little details of the mini. You can tell on the arm guards there what a difference it makes. He's also got some earrings. Now these were a bit tricky, and again I put a bit of a blob on one of them. His ears were a bit tricky because his earrings are like strange. He does they're like high up on the ear, but they're not like rings really. You see some people who have earrings high up on the lobe of the ear, but this seems more like a clamp at the top. But it's a bit odd. If you actually see the artwork for the game, it's a little bit odd, and it was a little bit difficult to paint, but I did my best. It looks okay. Here we're doing a proper dry brushing now with the shining silver. Not gunmetal, like I said before, it is shining silver. That's why I went with shining silver. I still wanted it to be light. I was worried that the gunmetal would make it a bit too dark. And this is a really light dry brushing because I didn't want the blade to look too silver. I just wanted to make it look like a highly polished but steel blade, not a silver blade. As I said, I got it in my mind that Shevatas was very fastidious about his appearance and his bling and his weapons, so it keeps him all clean. Whereas with Conan, I was putting plenty of shade on, because Conan, he just like though he looks after his weapons, he generally has them stuck in people. And it's more a case of he's using them all the time to kill poor unfortunates, rather than sat there like keeping them clean in a traditional manner. And here we're just doing various touch-ups. Right, we're back here. I've done a bit of what's the word? Corrections, a few corrections here. I think I'm just polishing off my corrections here. Just see me getting close to where I've gone over. And I'm just starting to highlight now. So this is the original colour I used. So I'm just going over where the shade has dulled the skin a little and bringing it back up. And then I will mix in some lighter brown and do a further highlight. As I mentioned during my Conan episode, that the highlighting is where, you know, the real professionals shine, and they will highlight and highlight and highlight and highlight. I've only done a couple of highlights, and it's good enough from 2 feet away with eyesight like mine. So I only do a couple of highlights, and but the more you can blend it in, and the more highlights you do, then the more, you know, the more of a professional looking job that you get. So here it's the usual thing. The areas that are really catching the light. If he was outside under the sun, those are the areas that you do the highlighting to. Start with a big area with your lowest highlight. If that makes any sense. And then the lighter and lighter that you mix your paint, just do a smaller area each time. So quite a lot of the top of his bonce here is getting this first highlight, and then when I do the second lighter highlight, it'll be slightly less. So you get a gradation. So I'm doing things like his cheekbones here, and the tip of his nose, his brow, backs of his hands, his knuckles, his shoulders, and pecs, and his thighs, that sort of thing. There, let that dry now. And now I'm just doing a single highlight pretty much for the wrap. So just along the folds, along the top of the belt there, where it's just above the belt, and the edges of the wrap, and obviously where the folds show. So we'll brighten those up. Obviously the idea is to avoid those the creases. That's why you put the shade on, to accentuate the creases. So you just want the bulge of the folds and the areas of the wrap that are actually going to show up in the light. It does look pretty shiny here, and in his the pictures that I took as well, like the one right at the beginning of this episode, he does look shiny, but he isn't really. It's because it's got some really bright lights on him, so he's looking a lot shinier than he is. Obviously the gold's shiny because it's gold paint, but particularly the wrap and his skin looks extremely shiny, but it's not really. hopefully you'll be able to see that when I actually play the board game. And because obviously I've got really bright lights here because I'm painting him. But when I play the board game, the lighting won't be as harsh, and hopefully you'll see he's not quite as bright as he looks. That wasn't a problem we had with Conan because we were painting him sort of dull browns all the time. But I don't want you to think that Shevatas is just there glowing like a lighthouse. It is the lighting that's making him look particularly bright. And here we are. This is a lighter brown that I've mixed. As you can see, I'm not doing, I'm not putting as much on as I did for the first highlight. And just doing things like the top of the head, the top of the shoulders, his thigh, where he's thrust his thigh forward of his right leg. His elbow, his knuckles, just that sort of thing. There's a little bit of an error there when I put it that you can still see. He's like a big blob on his kneecap, which I wish I'd blended in a bit more. But you can only spot that when you really get close up, like in the picture I took. But once he is down, like where those bottles are, you can't tell. But close up, it does look a bit just there on his right knee. I've just sort of put a bit of a blob that I could have done with blending in a bit more. Okay, so he's pretty much finished here. We've got some matte black, and what we're going to do with that is he does have, though you won't believe it, he does have a little bit of hair. He has a tiny, I believe it's called a queue. It's just like a tiny ponytail at the back. So that's what I'm putting on here. You can't really see it, but I'm putting it on anyway. So I'm using matte black because I wouldn't use normally for hair, but with the dark skin tone I wanted it to stand out, so pretty much had to use matte black. And he's also got a little goatee, so I'm just putting a tiny little goatee on there. Just for personal amusement, really. From 3 feet away, you probably won't be able to even tell. But there we go. We've popped those on. Now those have dried. If you'll notice on the base, there's like where the blue ink has run. Now with Conan, I left the base and just based it across it because I wanted it quite light. I wanted it to be like a sandy desert. So I'm using a very light brown here to go over the base, which I didn't do with Conan. But the only reason is to cover that blue because of the ink that ran down his legs when I did the shading. And I didn't want that showing through when I based. So that's the only reason I'm putting the light brown on here. It's just to make sure I cover that blue. And I just didn't want it showing through. So it was just to tone down that little bit of ink that had run onto the base. I could have painted white over it, I suppose, but I just thought I'd do it a light brown, seeing as he had the brown in the wet palette there. Right, having done that, here I'm taking the PVA glue. There it is, PVA wood glue. Just put it into that normal artist palette there. Big blob of it. And then we use that crappy brush there. Get it stuck right in. And we're just going to blob it right on. Now, looks really, really thick and white. Don't worry about it because 1, it's going to be covered with grit. And 2, it does dry clear. That's the good thing about this PVA glue. It looks white when you put it on, which is good because you can see where you're putting it. But once it dries clear, and it's just the stuff for basing. It's great stuff. Love it. So there we are, we've got plenty of glue on there. I'm going to get my little tub of grit now. I'm going to give it a shake in front of the camera. You saw a bit of the of my hanash. It's like a lamp that they use in you know, in the dentists. So that's why it looks so shiny. Shevatas. And there you are. You just pop it in like that. It's so easy. And there you go. It's all stuck onto the base there. I've stuck him back on to his cork. Just let that dry a bit. And then what we do is add water. So he's dried out now. And I've added some water to the PVA glue. As you can see, it's going on here, but it's really watery. And what that does, it just puts a thin film of the PVA glue over your basing material. It helps it stick there. And once it dries absolutely clear. And it means that, you know, your grit's not going to fall off. Additionally, later on, I'm just painting the edge of the base here black. Later on, I'm obviously going to take I'm going to give him a bit of a spray with dull coat, matte varnish, and that will help keep the grit on as well. The matte varnish doesn't look like matte varnish. You'll see that in a minute when I spray it. The reason being is it isn't fully dried when I come back. When you see it at the end after I've sprayed it, it does look like I've done it with you know, normal gloss varnish. I haven't. It is matte varnish, but it hasn't fully dried. Once Shevatas fully dried, as I say, he's not as shiny as he looks, because he's not under the harsh light, and the matte varnish is actually dried. So there he is. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all the subscriptions, for all the views, for all the likes and the dislikes. There he is, Shevatas again. And thank you for watching. I hope to see you next time when we will be painting Hadrathus, I think. But until then, this is me, Catweazle, saying toodaloo.